and welcome. Today I'm going to be taking another look at Homeworld Remastered. Homeworld Remastered, of course, came out this February of this year, 2015, and it is a remastered version of Homeworld, which is a game that was released in 1999. When Homeworld was released, almost 10 years ago or so, it really broke the mold of real-time strategy games. Up until then, you did have your Warcraft 1, 2, you had StarCraft, one of the more popular ones, and then you had the Command and Conquers and a smattering of other games, and they all followed the same formula. Build base, build units, throw all units at. I mean, there was some strategies for many of those games, especially like StarCraft. Total Annihilation, big one there. Homeworld introduced full 3D space, so you can send your units, 10 kilometers up or down off of the plane, and it does make the game very interesting. The game is also extremely cinematic. Giant space battles with fighters weaving in and out of capital ships, firing beam weapons. Very cool. So this has already been done. People have done Let's Plays. They have done comparisons with the original and the current version. And they have talked extensively about it. So I am coming a little bit late to the game. However, I'm still going to go ahead and do it. I am going to do a player versus CPU today, just to show the engine off. I then in the future will do a Homeworld 2, doing both the original games with the goal to actually start showing off some of the mods. This game and Homeworld 2 very famous for their modding community and how long it has lasted, and putting out some truly great mods. So, okay, let's go. Player versus CPU. Oh, let's go ahead and do Shield. We're going to play on hard because I like to lose, and I'm going to play as the Kushan against the Titan. So, one of the things that Homeworld Remastered introduced was a plethora of new options for player versus CPU games, and then multiplayer, which unfortunately is still in beta and still has some balancing issues, especially when playing one of the Homeworld 1 races versus the Homeworld 2 races. They ended up keeping the build and research system fairly intact between the two games. Unfortunately, that means that the Hygarans and the Vagars in Homeworld 2, when you build interceptors, you get 5 of them, or you get a full a squadron. Whereas in Homeworld 1, you build ships individually. Now, they are cheaper, but because of Homeworld 2's building and squadron system, they're able to throw out a lot more quickly. Let's see. Let's go ahead and do medium resources, unit cap, default, standard, lock teams, AI strategy. So again, some of the newer options, dynamic, I don't think I've noticed that, allow you to really change how the multiplayer feels. Introduction of bounties, which may actually have been in Homeworld 1 or 2, I forget, where you get resources for every kill you have. You can choose if there's resource injections. Challenges are kind of interesting. So you'll get challenges such as build 20 ships before the other player. And if you meet that challenge, then you will get a resource reward. Relics are another addition. And basically, it's a large object that comes into play either 5 to 10 minutes in. And whichever side controls it will start getting resource injections. I've noticed that when relics come into play, they become pretty much the major point of contention of the game, and all battles start happening around that. which that can be good or bad. They also introduce crates. Crates will randomly appear, and if you go send out a ship to collect it, it can give you money. It can warp in a ship, spawn a ship, and it can even give you technology. And another option here is playing with carriers only, which actually can be pretty interesting, because you're not getting the heavier capital ships, and the carrier is quite a bit more vulnerable. Okay, so let's go. Some of the visual additions to this game really were really magnificent. Makes the game look like a newer game coming out in 2014 or 15. There were a couple of options that I went ahead and turned off. The depth of field is great for cinematics. It looks very nice. In game, it gets a little funky. The other thing is motion blur. Motion blur, oh, love that hyper jump in. The motion blur, it causes issues. Okay, so what I usually do when I start a game with a carrier is I take that carrier and I throw it to another resource patch. That allows me to, let's see, scout going, research, nope.
Mothership.
Build. Basically throwing a carrier up to another research path or patch allows me to use it as a mobile refinery, basically, as well as being able to spawn fighters. It is a decent early game tactic. Okay.
Collection confirmed.
Get those guys going.
Collection
Scout
confirmed.
is out. And when you place your scouts, one of the things I found very useful is generally in a lot of maps, you know where the enemy is going to be. You don't know what they're doing. So I end up raising the altitude so they are out of the aggression range of the enemy, while still being able to give you sensor information on the enemy's fleet composition. It is very useful.
Mothership.
Okay, so I can't do resource controller yet. I, however, can do a resource ship. Resource collector. Start those. Oh, and there we go. Let's take a look. No fighters yet. They do have a crap ton of resource collectors, which I haven't even built any yet, or anymore. I do usually complement the near the mothership's resource area with a mobile refinery just to speed up the process of collecting. Oh boy, that takes forever. So with throwing your carrier up here in Homeworld 1, I have not really used this tactic. It's a tactic I usually use in Homeworld 2 and in some of the mods I like to play. And that's because the carriers are more versatile in 2. You can build defense platforms, basically your turrets. And you can also, in some of the mods, say like Complex, you can equip them with more advanced weapons to be able to protect your resource collectors. Right, got our first collector. Another great thing about throwing your carrier out first is the enemy are more likely to focus their attention on the closer group of units. This can save you early game rushes that attack your mothership. The downside, of course, is you could lose your carrier and your forward operating resource collector operation. Do I have that out yet? Okay, fighter drive. Corvette drive. We're going to start this early. One thing I do note between Homeworld 1 and Homeworld 2 is I do think that the research progression takes place a little bit faster with the Homeworld 1 races. And partially this is because they're just cheaper. You do have a few extra steps. For instance, when you're getting into fighters, you have to build the fighter drive and then the fighter chassis to be able to get the interceptors. So let's see. Have they gotten, yep, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, they have 5 interceptors out already, and they are moving them in. Oh, maybe. They're trying to decide. In, out. whatever weird formation that is. Speaking of formations, that's one of the things that the remastered version of Homeworld, they
Acknowledged.
kind of
Roger.
boffed. They switched over Homeworld
Collection
1
confirmed.
essentially to Homeworld 2's engine. And that made it to where the formations
Continue
from
combat station.
Homeworld 1 no longer work as they
Reporting.
did. Because before, if you look down here,
Research
you have
complete. New
Delta,
research available.
Lie or
New
Broad
corvettes
Formation, X,
available for
Claw,
construction.
Wall, and Sphere Formation. Those really affected how your strike craft operated in Homeworld 1. Now, it's really just affects how the ships look at rest. Once they get into combat, for the most part, they split up. They go their own ways. So, another problem with that is you have, so what is it called in here?
Standing
There we
by.
go. You have over here your behavior settings for your unit: aggressive, defensive, or passive. And Homeworld 1, and the defensive was called evasive in that. Those
Research
settings
complete.
actually made it
New
how,
research
or
available.
changed how
New
they fought.
fighters available for construction.
So in aggressive, they would do long firepower passes on their targets, focusing all their firepower they could.
Standing by.
Whereas,
Underway.
got corvettes. Sorry about that. Defender subsystem. While on evasive, they would break
Interceptor
off into
complete.
groups of two, basically a lead element and then a wingman who would then also defend the lead
Interceptor
element.
complete.
Very cool looking. It also made it to where your strike groups lasted quite a bit longer. Oops, build. I always forget the
First are
interceptors
clear.
build so
Construction
fast.
underway.
So, in Homeworld 2, however, they
Interceptor
completely
complete.
removed that. And because of Homeworld 1 being ported over, or being built within the new engine, the
Interceptor
newer
complete.
engine, you do
damage, please.
lose that.
Drawing heavy fire.
And that's a bummer. But
Confirmed.
considering
Interceptor
everything
complete.
else that we gain with the remaster version, I still consider it worthwhile
Supporting friendly units.
to
Interceptor
play the original.
complete. Standing by.
Now, if you're really caught up on having lost
Interceptor
those
complete.
little features,
Construction underway.
Remaster, of course, they've already got Corvettes out. That's awesome. I'm lagging behind here. Let's see, research, Defender Subtech,
All stations
Corvette
reported by the
chassis,
members.
please. What was I talking about? Oh, but if you want to have all the original features in Homeworld 1, you can play the classic Homeworld 1.
Under fire.
Homeworld 1 and Homeworld 2 Classic is bundled with Homeworld Remastered, which is fantastic, especially since the vast majority
I'm
of
taking
mods
it
that
here.
are currently out for Homeworld 2 mostly only work in Classic. Many of the mod makers are in the process of building new versions of their mods, which will work in the more high-def environment of Homeworld Remastered.
Research
So that's going to be
complete.
very cool
New
when we see
fighters
some of the real
available for
popular
construction.
mods start making their way
Resource
into
collector complete.
Remastered.
Reporting.
Okay, these Corvettes are bugging me. Do defenders? Nope. Interceptors? Nope. Looking for a unit that does okay against Corvettes. Looks like light Corvette is going to be my bet, unless I can get an assault frigate out. It's kind of odd. In game, when you click on the assault frigate, such as when you click
Roger.
on a unit, over here it tells you what it does.
Supporting
Resource
friendly
class,
units.
mineral excavation. Now with the assault frigate, when you
Sensors are
click on it
detecting an
there,
unidentified relic.
it tells you
Send
that
ships to
it
investigate.
is designed for anti-fighter and anti-strikecraft operations, when in reality it is only good against corvettes and frigates. They have a very hard time
Reporting.
dealing with
collector
anything
awaiting
heavier
instruction.
than that.
Reporting.
Okay.
Resource
Take a look
collector
down. I need to
complete.
get out of map mode. It's boring.
Copy.
Oh,
Collection
got a
confirmed.
lone guy out here. Carrier's doing fine. They're picking away. Okay, Bill.
Supporting friendly units.
Let's get some defenders
Birds
out.
are clear.
Oh, crap. I have a lot of money that I'm not
Research
using.